the first step is to follow this particular route. Get away from woo-woo, because you're in fantasy land. You've got to get away from that, and you've got to find the ground beneath your feet. I've been talking about ego strength. We both have, haven't we, love? And how important that is to prevent yourself from becoming mentally ill. You're going into a place where if you don't have any support beneath your feet, you run the risk of becoming mentally ill. Now, Jung talked about latent psychosis. You won't find that particularly in any kind of psychiatric diagnostic classification, because you're either mad or you're not, from their perspective. But, right, that aside, Jung is onto something in that sense, that if you start to play around with the collective unconscious as he coined it and understood it and communicated it, you are at severe risk of losing things. And Nietzsche's an example of someone who lost it. There are plenty of others. So keep your feet on the ground. Jung was a medical practitioner, he was a doctor, he was a psychiatrist, and that gave him a place to stand. When he went through his original experience, as he called it, from 1912 onwards, and others say that, for example, that he became schizophrenic and cured himself, that's open to a lot of questioning, really, about whether he actually did. He certainly put himself in the firing line of the imagery and material and its autonomy, but he held on to enough of himself to be able to do that when he went through that process. If you don't have the kind of ego strength that he had, then it's trouble. So you need it. So ground yourself in biology. If you ground yourself in biology, you go back to the genome and you go back to instincts. Take that from there. Also work on complexes, because they're the things that are going to mess with your head as you go into this journey in depth. And complexes people overlook, because what they think are archetypes, often are not. They are complexes. These things are voracious. They'll eat anything that you feed them. They will acquire them and utilise them. So be careful. So you do need a place to stand. I think that's probably enough to say on that, otherwise we'll get distracted and it's too premature. But yeah, we will be going in that direction with those who will follow that particular journey. But without ego strength, which any psychiatrist understands, don't they? The importance of having that.
Yeah. It's the acid test, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
And one of the first things they look for is whether somebody has any insight to their present situation. And I mean, that's Psychiatry 101, isn't it?
It is.
And anyone who doesn't, basically, is on the way to probably, psychosis in their view anyway. And somebody who has retained insight is considered to have some ego strength or certainly some orientation to the real world left. So it's that basic, unfortunately.
Yeah, it is that basic.
I can hear it now, guys typing away or listening away going, do I have ego strength? Is that the qualifier then? Is whether or not you can be reflexive and you have insight?
Yes, yeah, it is. It boils down to that. Yeah. So if someone's lost all insight, they've essentially lost contact with reality.
Yeah, they have. Yeah.
And there's the emphasis on the idea of reality again as being something important.
Yeah, you've got reality orientation,
yes.
and they will. Psychiatrists will talk about things like overvalued ideas.
Yeah.
And you get that, for example, in paranoia. Somebody who's got an issue with paranoia, in a borderline sense, you may not even know it's there until you speak about something which triggers them in common contemporary parlance. Jung talks about this. He talks about people who, well, one person in particular in the collected works who was perfectly normal until the word or the expression Freemasons was used. And at that point the paranoia came out and you saw everything that was underneath it, pardon me, to do with that problem of how he felt the Freemasons were out to get him. Now you can get that with religion or any kind of political belief. You can get that as a result of influence from internet prophets and gurus. So overvalued ideas. And also with hypnosis, a fixed idea, which is the same thing, too much attention is being given to a particular cognitive structure, schema, value or belief system, and that effectively hypnotises them on the inside. And the result of both is that a person dissociates. They dissociate from reality, they split. And even the metaphor that I use a lot, which is the viral one to do with, we both use it, the viral analogy to say the complexes will get inside your self-concept and force your ego, your self-concept to replicate viral DNA, their psychological DNA, their ideas, their memes, if you like, in a Dawkins sense. So you can't separate yourself from them. Pierre Janet said exactly the same thing 120 years ago. So he was onto it then, and he was one of Jung's teachers. He was very, very influential on Jung's theory of complexes, and Jung hardly gives him credit, to be honest, but there were lots of people around at that time who were studying dissociation. Then there's things like word salad, which is just a jumble of ideas just coming out under pressure of speech. Pressure of speech is another one. Word salad, pressure of ideas, night's move thinking, jumping around all over the place. And some people who are intuitive will think, God, that's me. And it's not, it's the content that you have to look for. And when you're listening to people like that, where's the energy? What are the core ideas? What are they fascinated by? What is constantly self-referred to, if you like, as being valuable to them? They'll seize on it in a conversation. If you're having a conversation with them about something, say, oh, that's it. And then it's all there. And then you get hit with a tsunami of word salad. And it's been produced by these core ideas. They don't have good ego strength or ego boundaries at all, because you can see this thing operating within them. These overvalued ideas very often take on a religious, or in psychiatry say religiose, wouldn't
yes,
they?
They would, yeah.
And they take on a delusional intensity. And you have primary delusions and secondary delusions. The primary one is the core, secondary delusions support the primary delusion. Then you might get a folie à deux, where two people share a delusional belief system. In other words, one person's been infected by the other person's complex and then manufactured it. The two of them are in a relatively stable and long-term sustaining system. But this is considered psychiatry, biomedical psychiatry.
I actually think though, Steve, you sometimes see more suffering with a severe neurosis than you do with psychosis.
I'd agree with you, love, yeah.
Because the ego is still relatively intact, and so it experiences more suffering in that regard.
Yeah.
Whereas, when people have literally gone over the edge and they're drugged up to the eyeballs and they have essentially lost all contact with reality. Yeah. I'm not saying they're not suffering, but in that subjective sense.
No. You're right. They believe their system is actually logical.
Yes.
They think it has
from within it. Yes. Yeah,
and in Carl Jung's day, he would analyse these people in the Berg-Holzli. Unfortunately, it was called the lunatic asylum at the time. And he would analyse the content, and he would abstract out from that the attempt from within the psyche to normalise itself by becoming systematised.
Yes.
And you still see that now with people, don't you?
Absolutely.
Inside a psychosis, there's usually some ideation which is rational, and it organises the other thinking, but then you do see that it's excreting the delusions as well, and these strange ideas. So if you encounter people who have odd ideas, say, preaching them on the internet, then look for the core irrationality in what they're saying. It will be there, it'll be manifest. And very often they're very good speakers, and that they can influence people. And if you have a weak ego boundary yourself, you can become influenced by them. And this is why we've said in the past, be wary. Yeah. Because their illness will want to infect you.
Yeah, want to replicate itself.
Want to replicate itself. It's a form of life which is essentially an information-based system. And in a biopsychosocial sense, then, information is just that. It's a self-replicating, stable system that can move from one system's level to another. Once it passes the personal level, it goes out into the environment and starts to replicate like a virus, and it's everywhere. With susceptible people whose psychological immunity is low to influence and suggestion. And if you internalise these ideas, they can be very, very harmful. So you need that. And this is why we emphasise the rationality and the logic, the hard biology that says this is what's causing that, this is what I am. And then I can work on my psychology and work on my relationships. But if you jump in the deep end, you're at risk. You're at risk because it's a very crowded place. There's a lot of strange people in there who've lost it. And, you know, just like you're at risk of picking up infections from other people if you get in a bath with them or a jacuzzi, if you get in the collective mindset, you're going to have stuff passed to you as well, whether you're aware of it or not. So be careful.